Welcome back to Power and Politics. We're talking about this. I'm going to show it to you because some people always ask me, what does it look like? These are, the Auditor General does a series of reports and they come out in different files. Each file is one thing the Auditor General and his team examine. He was on the program earlier. We're talking about the criticism and the examination that he leveled against delays for mental health services for veterans. That's part of one of these reports. They're always worth reading, folks, if you want to do some good, hard policy reading. The Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of International Trade, Erin O'Toole, is still here. But now we've brought in Malcolm Allen, the NDP's agriculture critic, and the Liberal Veterans Affairs critic, Frank Valeria. Gents, thanks for jumping in here. I was just speaking to Mr. O'Toole about that. Very quickly, I'll start with you, Malcolm Allen. Your reaction to what the Auditor General said about mental health services for veterans.
Well, it's actually a scathing report. Mr. O'Toole indicated earlier that the Auditor General gave me a decent report on the rehabilitation, which is true, the timeliness. But out of 16,000 veterans and service personnel that were requiring mental health benefits, only 1,000 were in the rehab program. 15,000 were in the disability program. So clearly, in excess of 90-some-odd% were in a program where the timeliness, as the Auditor General pointed out, just wasn't satisfactory. In fact, it was a failure. You know, and Evan, when they talk about this 16 weeks that Veterans Affairs Canada talks about in the sense of completing, they're talking about paperwork. So they're saying when they've completed the application process, it takes 16 weeks just to get the paperwork through the system, and then we'll start working on what do we do next, which the Auditor General pointed out, that's why vets say it takes up to 32 weeks and sometimes even longer. And we've heard the examples of vets waiting for almost a year to get referrals, to finally get there. And we're dealing with folks, and I'm sure Mr. O'Toole agrees, he was a serving member and he's a vet himself. He knows that some of these vets are suffering tremendously. We all know that. And at the moment in time when they're really at their wits' end, we really need to be serving them at the beginning of the process,
right,
not at the very end. And so it's incumbent upon the government to really have stepped up to the plate a lot longer than this, a long time ago. The vets have been indicating to the ministers, not just this one, but the previous ones. And certainly we have, from the opposition bench, has been saying that as well.
All right, Frank Valeria, the government put $200 million over the weekend to mental health services. There's that $1.1 billion in lapse funding that they say is really, it was just an estimate. And now you get the Auditor General's report. Put it all together. What's your response to how vets have been treated?
Okay, well, this isn't our first disclosure. Today isn't an advent of some sort about that we have a problem. This has been going on for years. We knew years ago. Pat Strogan, a former Veterans Ombudsman, has been complaining about it since 2011. Veterans committees have been asking for help. They had the opportunity to help with that over $1 billion that lapsed. I understand it went back to Treasury, but the fact is that it was available money back then and veterans were ignored. But what was striking today for me was what the Auditor General said. He said they're not receiving it in a timely fashion. He said on your program, if they start the process today, it could take a year. Now think about this. A veteran who's not wishing to disclose mental illness because of the stigma attached finally comes out of the darkness, is willing to get help, and he has to wait, or she has to wait, a full year for that kind of help.
Right.
It's just not appropriate. And the problem is that the government continually denies it. The $200 million is really just cynical damage control, in my opinion. Cynical damage control, nothing more. Because the Veterans Ombudsman also said the government is unconcerned. Those were his words, unconcerned, because they don't test the outcomes. They don't even check, Evan, to see whether they're receiving proper services.
I got 1 minute here because I want to get to one other thing. Erin O'Toole, you're listening to the opposition. Every day counts. There's been a rash of suicides. I asked the Auditor General, is it related? He said, I can't make that link, but it's very dangerous when people with serious mental health issues are waiting so long for services. What is the most immediate change your government's going to make?
Well, the Auditor General, we put on the case to try and get some of the measures we talked about. Frank talked about stigma, and that is important. Evan, I was on your show when you covered some of the tragic military suicides last year. We're trying to address and break down the stigma, get people to come forward. One of the measures the Auditor General showed that between 2002 and 2014, there's 10% more cases within the Canadian Force present themselves. Now, a large part of that is because we are slowly addressing the stigma issue. Men and women in the forces, and as they transition out, need to know that there are good programs for them. We're opening up this network of operational stress injury clinics, and in the vast majority of cases, if you can get that assistance, you can go back to being a productive member of your unit,
sir, with
family.
all due respect, I mean, and I'm not saying that's a bad program, but part of the problem was the Auditor General said the government's not even analyzing the data. You're not following it from a veteran's perspective.
That's right.
How do we know this is going to be effective if you got the telescope pointed the wrong way?
Well, we've set benchmarks that we think need to be met. The 80% within 2 weeks for rehab, 80% assessed within 16 weeks for the disability benefit. We asked the Auditor General, Evan, specifically to see how we're doing against that measurement. In one area, we're doing okay. The other area, we're not meeting it, and we need to improve, and some of the investments we're making is to make sure that we meet that target.
Can I just say, I got 30 seconds. The Auditor General also talked about this Nutrition North program. The government says more healthy foods are getting to more northern communities, and they subsidize it. The problem is the subsidies, there's no measurement of where the subsidies are going. According to the Auditor General, I'll read, the department has not done the work necessary to verify that the northern retails are passing on the full subsidy to consumers. The department did not require information on profit margins. It did not require contribution agreements with retailers through its compliance reviews. In other words, the government's been calling a program a success, but it has no data to figure out if it's a success at all. Mr. O'Toole, how could the government call a program a success and the Auditor General said you don't even have the information to figure that out?
This program is a success because we created it to make sure more families in the North had ability to get more nutritious food in their diets, and we've been able to determine that average cost per family in the North has come down by over $100. What we have to get better at, and this is what the Auditor General is showing, is to see exactly how much flows through, because it is a program designed to make prices go down at the retail level. It's not a direct subsidy to consumers. We've got to track that better, but we've been able to show that families are having savings on their grocery bill, and the intention is better food as a result of that.
To be fair, I'm just going to, I hate to keep contradicting you, but I'm just going to read the Auditor General's report, sir. It says Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development Canada has not managed the program to meet its objective of making healthy foods more accessible to residents of isolated northern communities. It has not identified eligible communities on the basis of need, and it has not measured whether the subsidies passed on.
And that's absolutely right.
That sounds like an F.
It is right.
No, the Auditor General hit it on the nail on the head. In fact, the measurement that the Aboriginal Affairs Department is talking about, the statistics the government are using, aren't actually the basket of goods that are subsidized. So they're actually not comparing apples to apples, or comparing apples to oranges again. And clearly in the North, we see two communities in Northern Ontario, both exactly the same, isolated, no road access. One gets a full subsidy, one gets a nickel.
We're talking about, Evan, we're talking about a government that got rid of the long-form census because they don't want to know the statistics. They don't want to know the facts. They're willing to work on fiction. They're willing to work intuitively. Our member from Labrador today said that it's costing more than double the price for goods and food in the North, and it is not working.
Evan,
and frankly,
this is a program
again, they remain unconcerned.
Under the previous government.
Unconcerned.
If we need to improve it, to show the flow through, we've got to do that. But we brought it in to provide an opportunity for more access to nutritional food.
But it's not working.
It is making an impact. We just have to do it better.
Aaron O'Toole, Malcolm Allen, Frank Valeria.
Thanks.
Lots to chew on, and I appreciate, no pun intended, by the way, but lots to dig into here. I appreciate that very much.